Welcome back. Now, one of the key issues facing whoever becomes Turkey's next president is EU membership. It's in process, but there are some issues that remain sticking points. High up on the list, criticism of Turkey's human rights record on torture and freedom of expression, claims of discrimination against minority groups such as the Kurds, and Turkey's refusal to open its ports and airports to Cyprus, an EU member. And there are other problems. Turkey recognizes the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, an enclave within Northern Cyprus, not recognized by any other country. And finally, less than half of Turks support EU membership. Mr. Kalin, why do so few Turks support this membership?
Well, we have to say that actually that's a number we have now, but 2 years ago, a year and a half ago actually, in October of 2005, when we got the date for EU accession talks, support for EU was about 80% in Turkey. And one has to ask why that number has dropped to what it is now, that is about 40%, definitely below 50%. And I think Europeans have made a lot of mistakes in the process. They have given very negative messages to Turkey. They have appeared to be very confused about the enlargement process of EU, and they emphasize this enlargement fatigue. But that issue comes up every time Turkey's EU membership is discussed, and that has sent very negative messages to the larger public in Turkey. And the government, civil society institutions, writers, columnists, journalists, I mean the elite of the society have supported this process. But every time you try to make a case for Turkey's EU membership, the culturalist argument comes back. That is, it's not the Turkish economy, it's not the Turkish judicial system, it's not the Turkish political system, but it's Turkey's cultural, religious identity that is at issue. And we heard the statements from Mr. Sarkozy, from Mrs. Merkel, and many other European politicians, and these are very high-level people. I think, put all these things together, this explains why the number has gone down so low.
Mrs. Robinson, do you agree that Europe is to blame?
Absolutely. I think Europe has handled it abysmally. I also think, though, let's be realistic, this is never going to be an election winner. People in Europe are losing their jobs and they blame it on globalization, rightly or wrongly. They blame it on extra immigration. And therefore, it's too hard for most politicians, and many of whom, if you look at most European governments, you've got coalitions or you've got very small majorities. It's very difficult for a politician to go against that.
So if Mr. Erdogan were to become president, Turkey's chances will remain the same?
I would say a bit worse, talking about what image that gives out, and also what you've got to realise is what he's done with the economy, and has been so wonderful. As as was pointed out, foreign direct investment is at record highs. In fact, in 2000, I think it was 2004. It was the equivalent in that 1 year of 10 years, the 10 years before, all added up together. I think there'd be a fear that he wouldn't be in charge anymore, and he has the westernized elite in Turkey is perhaps a bit ambivalent about him, but when I talked to them, and I interviewed the president in December, when I talked to this elite, they were terribly positive. They said, when he first got in, we were all afraid of some sort of a hidden agenda, but what we've seen is he's brought stability and he's allowed us to develop our business with foreigners, and it's worked tremendously well for both the business elite and for Turkey in general.
Okay, but still at issue for the EU in particular is Turkey's human rights abuses, accusations of that, and the role of the army. Dr. Coney, do you see the army downscaling its role to gain ascension within the EU?
All right, there's a rising nationalism because of the European attitudes. For example, the Kurds are accepted as a minority, but according to international law or the agreement signed in 1922, Lausanne Treaty, the Muslim minorities doesn't exist in Turkey. All the Muslims, Arab Kurds and Turks living together, are not accepted as minorities. So giving right to minorities is not seen well. And plus, the Turkey is really advancing on this agenda. The most important issue for the European is an Armenian genocide of 1915 and pressure upon Turkey. And plus, there is this Greek lobby on the Cyprus issue. The other economic and democratization issue doesn't really count. That's why the pressure of the army is coming upon the Turkish politics. They say the European attitude is not exact and just. So they are following their own agenda of the 1920s, 1950s.
And now the army is not particularly happy if Erdogan does run as president. We've seen many coups in the past. What is the chance now of there being a coup in the country if Erdogan does run as president?
I mean, if he run for presidency, we'll have a difficult reign for a while. But if he's changed, he's a very pragmatic person. You know, from 2002 up to now, he has changed a little. And he will try to change more. So it will be accepted. And army will going to watch his moves during his presidency and will act accordingly. So he will have 1 or 2 years, and the army will be very watchful upon his gesture and the decisions.
Now, as we said, one of the biggest criticisms leveled at the Turkish government is the lack of freedoms. Secularism is strictly enforced. Prime Minister Erdogan himself was jailed for publicly reading an Islamic poem with militaristic overtones. But the secular state isn't the only thing protected by the law. State employees are as well. Punk music, railing against the establishment. But these lyrics are tame by Western standards. Life should not be a prison because of an exam. 3 hours, 180 questions. May God protect my mind. The song is about the strict exam guidelines for new university students in Turkey. Enough to see them charged with insulting state employees, a pastime in many parts of the world. If convicted, the 5 musicians, along with their manager and a former band member, face up to 18 months in jail. The band is philosophical. They say they've clearly touched a nerve, but life could be worse.
Compared to dictatorships, Turkey is like heaven. Turkey still has a lot missing, but we believe it's on the right track to improve itself.
Mr. Kalin, do you believe it's on the right track to improve itself?
I think it is. I mean, if you look at the process and compare what happened 10 years ago and what's happening now, at various levels of the society, there is more demand for freedoms, for transparency, for accountability. And this is demanded by ordinary people from all walks of life. And it's demanded from all kinds of people, civilian politicians, from military, from bureaucrats, university professors. Anyone who has any power in Turkey now is held accountable.
Okay, Dr. Kearney, is this the new Turkey that everybody's talking about? Are we finally seeing the new Turkey here?
Yes, I mean, it's changing very quickly. There's a new generation. And Turkey, from geopolitical thinking, came up to the geoeconomic thinking. So the investments and the new developments are in everywhere. So there is more freedom for the ethnic cultural groups, just like Turks, and there is more understanding to Christian minorities in Turkey, but we still need a time, and the people of Turkey are demanding all these new developments.
Mrs. Robinson, is this new Turkey working for Europe and the rest of the world? Very briefly.
Absolutely, it is in every way, and you know, I think people who notice that perhaps some of the reforms that are needed for EU laws, to bring EU laws on the statute books, things don't always happen at the same speed. They may take a bit longer than expected.
And thank you to all our guests, Hasan Kony in Istanbul, Ibrahim Kalim in Ankara, and Karina Robinson in London. And thank you, our viewers, for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. As always, we welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. That's insidestory@aljazeera.net. From the entire team, goodbye for now.